I don't care what anyone says, an emergency fund should never be fully invested in the stock market. This video was sparked by a recent conversation with one person on Facebook who has their entire emergency fund completely invested in the stock market. Of course, they're loving it right now because the market has surged around 15 to 20% this year, but what they're not accounting for is the risk that comes with investing. There's no sense of risk or a worry about a downturn. What they're overlooking is the fact that the market tanked somewhere around 25 to 30% during the pandemic, and we've had much worse downturns in the past. Anyway, I wrote my opinion on this post on Facebook, and a lot of folks disagreed, and that's fine. Someone even said that an emergency fund is for the Dave Ramsey crowd, whatever that means. To each their own. But I view my emergency fund as insurance. I think it should be liquid and it should be readily available if you need it. That being said, what are some of the places where you can put your emergency fund? One of the options that is very popular these days is a certificate of deposit, or a CD. This wasn't a popular option a few years ago, but CDs are paying interest in the 4 to 4.5% range, and they've become quite popular recently. A CD is a type of a savings account, but unlike a regular savings account where you can withdraw the money up to 6 times a month, a CD requires you to keep the money in the account for a set period of time. You cannot withdraw the funds whenever you want. CDs have different terms ranging from 3 months to 5 years. When the CD term ends or matures, that is when you can either take the money out plus any interest earned, or you can put it into a new CD. Typically, the longer you keep the money locked in a CD, the higher the interest rates you'll earn. With that in mind, let's talk about the CD ladder strategy as an emergency fund. A CD ladder strategy is when you invest in several CDs with different maturity dates. For instance, if you have $5,000 set aside for emergencies, you could put $1,000 in a 3-month CD, another $1,000 in a 6-month CD, and the remaining $3,000 in a 12-month CD. With that approach, you have some money available to you in 3 months while earning higher interest on the longer term CDs. You can adjust the CD ladder depending on how long you're comfortable with your money being tied up. And you can create a CD ladder in different ways with different maturity dates. But the question is, why go through all this hassle? The answer is a rather simple one. The rates on CDs are often higher than a high yield savings account to make up for the money being less accessible. That's why people go through all this hassle. But even with all this hassle, the thing is, your money is tied up for at least 3 months. What if you need the money before the maturity date? That's why a CD is a supplemental account that does not or should not replace the need for a regular savings account. If you only have CDs as an emergency fund, you may be playing with fire. The next option is a high yield savings account. It is perhaps the most straightforward and the most flexible option for your emergency fund. It's easy to set up and it gives you better interest rates than a traditional savings account. Most high yield savings accounts are with online banks, so you can't withdraw money directly from a physical branch. Instead, you'll need to transfer money between different accounts, which could cause delays at times. Despite this, a high yield savings account is a quite accessible option for most people, and they're currently offering interest rates in the 4 to 4.5% range. I personally have my high yield savings account with American Express. They don't pay the highest interest, but I'm quite happy with them. The next option is a money market account. A money market account is a lot like a high yield savings account, since they both offer higher interest rates than a regular savings account. However, they do have some differences. A money market account often comes with perks like debit cards or the ability to write checks, which can be quite handy if you need quick access to your money. Another thing to consider is that money market accounts usually require a higher minimum deposit to open compared to a regular savings account. Some banks also offer different interest rates depending on how much money you deposit. You can open a money market account at most local and online banks, and online banks often offer better rates because they have low overhead costs. Whatever option you choose, make sure you know how to access your money quickly when you need to. Between the high yield savings account and a money market account, there isn't much difference other than a couple of minor differences. The next option is one that I don't recommend, but it keeps coming up, so I thought I'd talk about it. A Roth IRA as an emergency fund can be very tempting. The unique thing about a Roth IRA is that you can withdraw your Roth IRA contributions at any time without incurring a penalty or having any tax consequences. Now, this option is tempting because you are fully invested at all times and you have your money money working for you 24/7. However, using a Roth IRA as an emergency fund carries a risk of potential value loss. You may have to sell your assets at a less optimal time. It goes back to the start of the video where you are completely disregarding the risk. I mean, it's an option, but it should be your last option or your fourth or your fifth line of defense if it ever comes to that. Another very popular option these days is a HELOC, or a home equity line of credit. This option keeps coming up because Americans have a lot of equity in their homes. I post a lot on Facebook and get all kinds of comments from people, including real estate investors and lenders. Many of them disagree with my views on emergency fund, and they've repeatedly suggested using a HELOC instead. The reasoning being that it keeps your money working for you at all times. And if you know about HELOCs, you are only charged interest on a HELOC if you actually use the HELOC. If it's just sitting there and you're not using it, a HELOC does not cost you anything. However, there are risks with using a HELOC as an emergency fund. First, you'll need to pay off the loan by the end of the drop period. This could be a problem if a financial emergency like a health issue prevents you from working and making payments. If you can't pay both the principal and the interest, you could face foreclosure. Basically, you have put your house as collateral and you have your house on the line, and that's a problem if hits the ceiling. Most HELOCs also have adjustable interest rates, which means your repayment costs could go up if interest rates rise. I mean, we could make educated guesses about where the interest rates are going, but we can never be certain where the economy or which direction the economy is going. So you're putting your primary residence or your home on the line. And if you follow me on Facebook, you know very well that I don't mix personal assets with business assets. I like to keep them separate. Again, as with a Roth IRA, a HELOC could be your last resort as an emergency fund. If a Roth IRA is your fifth line of defense, a HELOC could be your sixth line of defense, at least in my opinion. Full disclaimer, I do have a HELOC, but I've never really used it and I don't plan on using it either. I'll talk about my emergency fund in just a bit. And the last option is I-bonds. I-bonds are another option that most people only learned about in 2022. Before that, no one really talked about I-bonds. I-bonds are tied to inflation rates, and in 2022 we had some serious inflation and I-bonds paid a record 9.62% interest. Now, although I-bonds are safe, they might not be the best option for your entire emergency fund. You cannot cash I-bonds before a year, and if you cash them before 5 years, you'll lose the last 3 months of interest. The comments on this post on emergency fund had I-bonds as a very popular answer. I don't know why, to be honest, why this is such a popular answer. The only reason I could think of is because the interest on the I-bonds are exempt from state and local taxes. But unless you have cash saved elsewhere and you're just using I-bonds as supplement to your emergency fund, I don't think they're the best option. Finally, my emergency fund is in a high yield savings account with American Express. They're currently paying 4.4% at the time of recording this video, but the Fed just lowered the rate, so we may see a dip there. I'm pretty sure that you can get a higher return at other places, but I don't like to move my money around unnecessarily or to gain 0.2 percentage point more. We sometimes go to great lengths just to get a tiny bit more return on our money, but our time and effort might be spent better elsewhere. For example, if you have $20,000 in your emergency fund and one account is paying you 4.5% interest while the other one is paying you 5%, you're only making an extra $100 a year. For me, it's just not worth the time and effort to change accounts. In the past, I've used a high yield savings account with a 3-month CD ladder, but I don't do that anymore. A high yield savings account or a money market account is the simplest and the easiest way to go, even if you're missing out on 0.2 percentage point in annual returns.